This is Fashion Fridays. Every Friday, we present you with a fashion icon or topic. Today we're looking at 15 things you didn't know about Gap. Welcome to Alux.com, the place where future billionaires come to get inspired. Hello, Aluxers, and welcome to a fact-filled list meant to entertain, inform, and inspire the next generation of billionaires. Today, we're taking a look at the international clothing brand Gap. It opened its first store on Ocean Avenue, San Francisco, on the 21st of August, 1969. Today, Gap has grown into a corporate giant that has sometimes found it difficult to support its own gargantuan weight. Last year, they announced revenue sales of close to $19 million. Its international growth and use of textile factories around the world has gained media attention for both positive and negative reasons. And we've compiled these facts to show how Gap's history in many ways reflects progressions in the global market, as well as ideas about corporate responsibility. If you're new here, welcome. Be sure to subscribe and follow us on Instagram at Alux. Let's get to it. Number 1. They copied the Tower of Shoes model to great effect. Gap's original success was based on an advertising model used by the Tower of Shoes. They rented an old warehouse in a particularly undesirable area of Sacramento, California, but still managed to make huge profits. The idea was that practical clothes and footwear did not have to be located on High Street, guaranteeing that every desired size, color, and style would be in stock was enough to attract customers to areas of town not typically associated with shopping. This saved money on rent and passed the savings on to the consumer. Number 2. The BBC released footage in connection to a child labor scandal back in 2009. In 2009, an investigative report by the BBC released footage clearly showing children working in factories where Gap clothing was produced in India. This attracted a lot of media attention, and the public became acutely aware of how many top brands, including Nike and Reebok, were using sweatshops and employing children in awful working conditions to save money on production. As a result, huge progressions have been made in countries like India and Bangladesh to protect the rights of workers and keep children in school. Number 3. Donald Fisher, the art collector. The founder of Gap, Donald Fisher, was an avid collector of contemporary Western art. In 1993, he was featured in Art News magazine as one of the top 10 art collectors in the world. He had original prints from the likes of Andy Warhol, Ray Lichtenstein, and Chuck Close. His collection was so extensive, he even proposed building a 100,000 square foot gallery in San Francisco to house it, but the plans never came to fruition. Number 4. Gap's first store made a profit of over $2 million within the first 2 years. Gap's first store opened in 1969 and made a whopping profit of over $2 million within its first 2 years of operation. The model for success was copied and extended quickly through the U.S. In just 4 years, by 1973, Gap had 24 store locations. Today, Gap operates in over 140 countries and has 3,594 stores. One of the largest markets outside of North America and Europe is in Japan, where there are 170 Gap stores. Number 5. Their quilted varsity jacket retails for about $130 and is the most expensive item. The most expensive item in the Gap inventory is a quilted varsity jacket that retails for around $130. Gap's model of success is built on practicality and trying to appeal to a wide audience base. In such a way, none of their items are particularly expensive. The fact that Gap is estimated to be worth around $3.2 billion goes to show you don't have to sell expensive items to be one of the largest and wealthiest brands on the planet. Number 6. The 29-month sales slump. At the beginning of the 1990s, Gap seemed like an unstoppable brand. They had stores all over the world. In the US, it would have been difficult to find a wardrobe that didn't contain at least one item of Gap clothing. However, by the end of the 90s, Gap had totally overextended and announced losses for 29 months straight between 1999 and 2002. This was an extremely troubling time for the retail giant, and they had to close over 400 stores worldwide. The closing of stores has continued to be a theme. In fact, this year, every single store in Australia was closed. The company's international presence seems to now be focusing on the emerging consumer markets of countries like India and China. In turn, they've tried to catch up with other companies, making huge profits from online retail without the need for physical storefronts. Number 7. The Jordanian labor scandal that Gap was never held accountable for. In 2016, Gap had a lot of its merchandise made in the Western factory in Jordan. Both children and adults were forced to work over 100 hours a week. Many had not been paid for over 6 months, and some claimed they had been raped by managers. Only in May 2018 did Gap stop using the Western factory for production of merchandise. Gap has largely been able to avoid scandals in circumstances like this because places like the Western factory are just suppliers. It's not owned by Gap, and the workers are not directly employed by the corporation. However, many people have called for a greater sense of social responsibility regardless, and those people are right. Number 8. Millard Draxler's bitter departure. From 1993 to 2002, the CEO of Gap was Millard Draxler. He was forced out by the board of directors after a 29-month slump in sales. It was also reported that tensions had begun to run high between him and the Fisher family. He refused to sign a non-compete agreement and became the CEO of J.Crew. Immediately after his departure, sales bounced back as a result of a collection that he had chosen. Number 9. September 2018, a brand new and maybe even a fresh start. Gap has just announced its first brand for over a decade. Hill City targets sporty men with busy and varied lifestyles. The idea is that many men need technical clothing that will make it easy to move from workouts to the office to home conveniently. The hope is that Hill City will complement Athleta and help to boost the overall sales of Gap Inc. Number 10. A U.S. brand that overshadows its British competitor. Gap has 3,594 stores, whilst Next has 538. Next has often been compared to Gap as its British counterpart. The two companies produce clothing targeted at similar audiences for similar prices. Gap, however, is a far larger operation. It has over 175,000 employees worldwide, whilst Next has close to 50,000. Number 11. Targeting Asia's growing consumer market. Gap's recent drive for growth is focused in Asia. Many Asian countries have a growing middle class, with more disposable income available for clothing products. It has 156 stores in China and are about to open stores in Myanmar, Cambodia, Thailand, Malaysia, and Vietnam for the first time. So interestingly enough, countries that were originally used to make the products for consumers in the West are now being targeted as prosperous marketplaces with huge sales potential. Number 12. Gap depends on its subsidiary brands for revenue success. Forbes recently published an article that suggests that the Gap brand is actually dragging down the company. Its subsidiaries, particularly Old Navy, Banana Republic, and Athleta, have reported sales revenues and growth at a far healthier rate. All of these subsidiary brands focus on certain target audiences. Athleta, for instance, targets women over 30 who want quality sports equipment at affordable prices. The Gap brand may in fact have become too general in the current global market. Number 13. They have a gargantuan U.S. workforce. The fact that Gap has over 175,000 employees makes it in the top 50 U.S. employers list. Many families rely upon the success and continual growth of this brand at home as well as internationally. As a result, Gap is working extremely hard to make sure expansion and growth is maintained gradually. A repeat of the gloom that surrounded the turn of the millennium could see more workers made redundant. Number 14. Why Gap is called Gap. When Gap started out back in 1969, it sold none of its own clothing. Most people will tell you it only sold Levi and Strauss Co. merchandise, but it also sold LPs to try and attract the youth. In fact, the name Gap refers to the generation gap that was being referred to in the mainstream US media at the time. It only started making its own lines of clothing in 1973, when the first East Coast store was opened in New Jersey. Number 15. Gap's dark influence on a positive revolution. Gap, along with other fashion and retail giants, has changed the world in many ways. Perhaps the most important change is how we view the global market and rights of workers around the world. For decades, Western consumers had been unknowingly purchasing and wearing clothes that were made by laborers in some awful working conditions around poverty-stricken areas of the world. The media attention gained in recent times has helped to create better working environments for some of the most vulnerable people around the globe. There is, however, a very long way to go before injustice for laborers is totally tackled. And there you have it, Aluxers, 15 little-known facts about one of the largest retailers of clothing on our planet. Now, before you go, we have a question for you. In terms of sales and design, what's your prediction for Gap Inc. in the next 5 years? Do you think Hill City will take off as a popular brand in the US? Let us know in the comments. And of course, for sticking with us all the way to the end, you know you get a bonus fact. Here it is. Number 16. The 7-day logo change bomb. Gap changed its logo on the 4th of October 2011. The change was met with so much displeasure that it only lasted 7 days. The brand reverted back to its original logo design, and Marka Hansen, the executive responsible for the logo change, promptly resigned. Thank you for spending some time with us, Aluxers. Make sure to like and subscribe so you never miss another video. We also handpicked these videos, which we recommend you watch next. Thank you for being an Aluxer, and we'll see you back tomorrow.